Okay.
Miss your life is Ocarina of Time. Esfand is the childhood forest and Maya is Ganon. Don't leave please wisely potted.
Chat, I'm not gonna grow up anytime soon. I'm telling you. I got no reason to grow up. I'm all good, okay? I don't need to grow up. I mean, you know what's this? The only sad thing about me is I'm just sad. Other than that, there's nothing sad, and I have got a great life, and it's all thanks to you guys. Maya Hegendorf. Okay, that's good. Grow up? I'm not growing up. Look, when you're my size, there's two options. You either go to some place in the opposite side of the world and do some dances and make a little love. Defeat Maya? Maya? I like Maya. What? What, I can't like Maya, chat? Is there a problem with that? Bro, this chat is hella funny. No, they're not. Look, if you're here for more than 2 days, you realize that none of us are funny. We just say the same jokes. What is this? Metal Gear Solid? Yeah, we'll watch this. All right, boys. Peepo Pog, Pog, smiley face. Let's fucking do it. Let's watch the video. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 3, 2, 1.
You slave, brother, and bring an extra battery for me.
You fool! Do you think I'm unaware?
What the?
Dear Activision.
Fuck you.
My name's Jarvid and I'm a filmmaker and game designer in Sydney, Australia. 2016 marks the 20th anniversary of 3D platformer pioneer and video game icon heavyweight Crash Bandicoot. The series tasted that same sweet distinguished air as home console heroes Super Mario and Sonic the Hedgehog after only 2 years with glowing reviews and massive sales. Crash connected with the public in a big way, but at the turn of the console generation, began to lose his way and the series came to a sudden halt 6 years ago.
True.
So Activision, as you're the current holder of Crash's development rights, I'm addressing you in this essay to present my case for what I believe is the cause of Crash's terminal failure.
Dude, types
And
fast
hopefully
as
in
fuck.
turn, provide insight into how the series could be revived. I'm labeling this essay Crash Bandicoot and an icon decline.
I just pictured Trainwreck's typing that whenever he does his bullshit typing, whatever on his stream. Oh, God,
Crash 1, 2, and 3 were released within a year of each other under the guidance of award-winning dev team Naughty Dog. All 3 titles were met with critical acclaim and praised for their creativity and ingenuity. Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped released in 1998, which outsold all of the biggest platforming titles that year, including Banjo-Kazooie, Spyro the Dragon,
Really?
Apes Exodus, and even Sonic Adventure.
I didn't know that.
All 3 Crash games sit in the top 10 best-selling PS1 games of all.
Chat, would you agree that Crash sits in the top 10 best-selling Nintendo or PlayStation games of all time? Easily.
Time, and Warped rates the highest in the series with 91%. So why is it that we see this significant drop in ratings in the Crash Bandicoot games that followed the original series? Well, between Warped and Wrath of Cortex, there was not only an introduction of next-gen home video game consoles, but an exchange where we saw Naughty Dog pass over their development rights to different teams. Something was clearly lost in translation when these new developers tried to execute their vision of Crash, and this is what I want to discuss here. I want to put into 3 words the core creative essence of the primary games, and then put the secondary titles under the lens of this assessment to determine why and how these developers failed to
Jesus,
engage
dude, who's writing
audiences as
this fast?
successfully as the
Fucking Wreckful?
originals.
What the hell?
So let's start from the beginning. The first Sony PlayStation console hit North American shelves in September 1995, with Sega Saturn launching that same month. Nintendo dropped their N64 console a year later in June 96, and the polygonal era was officially upon the public. The platforming genre at this time had existed predominantly in the 2-dimensional space, with only a few minor titles pushing that third dimension like Jumping Flash on the PS1, but no 3D platformers existed in the mainstream until 96. The only notable 3D platformers to be released that year were Bubsy 3D,
Bubsy,
Super Mario
baby.
64, and Crash Bandicoot. Mario 64, which is undeniably the figurehead game for 3D platforming, places its importance on level architecture and character
Bubsy.
control of feel, which is brilliant. Visually though, Mario 64 is just nonsense. Mixed textures and conflicting colors, while no doubtably intentional decisions made by Nintendo, remain relatively forgettable, and Nintendo cleaned this up in their DS remake.
What?
Now, to bounce this off Crash Bandicoot, which released that same year, highlights the reason the Crash series began as strong as it did. Not only does Crash present a strong execution of a platform game, the architecture surrounding these levels are brimming with lush detail. Fleshed out flora and fauna species, incredible attentions to detail in nature, man-made objects, and the enemies. All of which aren't essential to Crash's core gameplay system, but are used as the foundation for Naughty Dog's level design. Trees, lily pads, wooden structures, industrial design, etc. They've used nature to build their levels, which isn't anything to turn our heads at here in 2016, but in '96, this was new in the 3D platforming space.
Really?
And Naughty Dog knew it.
Mustache Man, your worst nightmare has arrived. Pack up your stuff. I got a little surprise for you here. Check it out. What do you think about that? We got real-time, 3D, lush organic environments.
A fixed camera angle allowed for an increased polygon draw distance, but this still had its limits. With a limited polygon count allowed on screen at any given time, Naughty Dog used a new technique called occlusion culling to keep these polygons balanced. In short, you could hide a dense group of polygons behind one larger polygon until those vertexes were needed to render the stage out as it
What
comes
the
up.
hell's happening?
This means every hill and valley, structure, and leaf positioning are strategically placed throughout each level to conserve polygons and avoid any system lag. Hacking the original PlayStation's hardware was the only method of achieving this occlusion technique, but hitting the hardware directly went against PlayStation development guidelines at the time. In a 2011 article on the subject, original Crash creator Andy Gavin explains how Sony's very own internal development team had attempted to compete against Crash with a title called Jalapeno Harry, but was later cancelled after failing to achieve anything close to the same visual complexity on their own
Jalapeno
hardware.
Harry.
In Crash 1 and 2, the maximum distance at which you could see any polygon was about 70 meters. In Crash Warped, we've opened that up to 700 and some odd meters.
Crash Bandicoot as a game is a visual and programming marvel, so the word beautiful seems appropriate to use for Crash's creative essence. And this doesn't just relate to the polygonal density.
And the line art is a more finished artwork that leads eventually to being a color key, which has the actual palette of that level.
While bright and beautiful, we see the color palettes chosen in each stage exist to complement Crash's orange and blue design. From deep greens and sandy brown jungle landscapes to the cold steel greys of Cortex's industrial levels. What's more, we're shown impressive uses of particle systems in the lighting engine. Naughty Dog broke ground technically and were praised by critics for their water physics across all three original games.
Fucking Mario Kart.
Sound designs were ambient and weaved in and out of the music to create feelings of space, and the soundtrack itself exercised artistic restraint and its melody minimalism. Thus, beautiful is our first chosen word. The second word I want to argue in Crash's creative essence is the word sharp. This sharp concept relates to a few different areas, but the main one here is in the character design. Generally in character design, we use something called shape language. In short, everything we see, specifically here in the West, from the alphabet to everyday objects, are
John, I'm not gonna lie, I don't even know what to say to all this because it's just too smart for me.
variations of the three primary shapes: square, circle, and triangle. We've learned that we associate certain emotions to each of these shapes, and character designers, sometimes obviously or subtly, implement these shapes in their design to help their characters convey a certain personality. The square commonly represents stubbornness, pride, strength, and simplicity,
Squidward.
while the circle conveys a softness, friendliness, and trust.
That's what Trainwreck talks about. Trainwreck literally has a square face. He always talks about it. He's like, dude, bro, he always says he has a square face, and how, like, me and Poke and, like, have, like, circle faces. That, like, since people like that apparently have, like, circle faces, I don't know if that's alluding to the fact that I have no chin. I don't really understand why, but he says the people apparently who have, like, more, I guess, like this, which looks exactly like Poke, to be honest with you, it's, like, more wide people happy. More like Trainwreck looks like a terrifying monster. Does it make sense?
The triangle is associated with danger.
I mean, what the reality is, chat, if you were to see me or Trainwreck, right, come at you, and I'm like, yo, and Train said, yo, who do you think's gonna beat you up? Hello? Gross score is the answer.
Unpredictability, and wildness. If we take a look at Crash's original design, we see his makeup consists of all triangles, from the body shape, the snout, the hair, the ears, to the eyebrows. There is a sharp edge to his design, and this communicates his persona of insanity to the player strongly enough. I recently interviewed original Crash composer Josh Mansell, and he speaks into
It
this.
goes with the character design. And Crash stuff is kind of angular, you know what I mean? It has this kind of like sharp look to it, and when I listen to the Crash music, I'm like, oh yeah, this is like kind of this, you know, busybody percussion stuff has this kind of like pointillist vibe about it, which kind of goes with the pointy nose and like, you know.
Yes. I can't believe that you just said that, because I'm working on a case study.
The way Crash controls also falls under the umbrella of Sharp. Huge steps were made between Crash 1 and 2 in the way we relate to the character through the controller. From only a jump and a spin in the first game, to combo linking in Crash 2 with slides, high jumps, slide to high jump, slide to high spin jump, and belly flops. More power was given to the player, and his moveset was quick, sharp, and precise. This created an energetic relationship to those beautiful environments I already mentioned, and how he had to navigate certain areas with speed and quick thinking.
Speed.
And so, sharp is the second chosen word in Crash's creative essence, through the energetic controls and the angular character design communicating a sense of insanity, which bleeds perfectly into my third and final argument. Insanity.
Crystals. Of course.
The most subtly underlying yet completely obvious technique in the series is Naughty Dog's insane combination of different designs. We mentioned briefly how Crash visually pops out against the environments, and this concept carries over here. Naughty Dog emulated the ambience and feeling of real-world places, from detailed native Mayan architecture to steel and metal power plant design. The inspiration for these levels called upon real places, and everything that populates these areas makes sense.
They copied Super Mario Sunshine.
What doesn't make sense? An orange anthropomorphic punk rock Bandicoot with a mohawk, jeans and Chuck Taylors, bashing through these ancient landscapes. A common advertising technique is used where mashing together two things that don't naturally belong can create something compelling.
Clip chimps.
Naughty Dog has used this technique here in Crash's overall visual aesthetic, and it's definitely interesting. Referencing again Mario 64, Nintendo's color scheme, as bizarre as it is one that matches Mario's character design, and it works.
I liked it.
In other words, Mario feels like he belongs here. In Crash 1, 2, and 3, our protagonist doesn't belong where he is. A 20th century Western character design against an ancient backdrop untouched by the modern age, or a futuristic laboratory riddled with robots and laser dance parties. The juxtaposition was insane, but it seemed to be connecting with the public. We have the insane motives and characteristics of the villains, Cortex turning animals into servants, and Brio's and N-Jin's mad scientist persona, Pinstripe and Ripperoo's overall insanity, and Uka Uka's lust for evil. And finally, we can see that Naughty Dog knew what they were trying to achieve in the game's overall character, from the title of the very first playable level in the series, Insanity Beach. Beautiful, sharp, insanity.
Cover girl.
Summing up, these three themes don't exist in separation from each other, but, as we've discovered, seem to be continuously and intricately bouncing off one another from beginning to end. These themes have covered everything from visual and sound design, subtleties and character personas, to gameplay. The primary games are strong. They have polish, they pushed boundaries, and Naughty Dog clearly perfected a compelling gameplay formula over the course of the trilogy, and it sold millions. But now let's look at the secondary games.
The Wrath of Cortex.
Wrath of Cortex dropped late 2001,
I didn't even hear about that
3
game.
years after the release of Warped, and the first with new developer Traveler's Tales,
Blech.
responsible for such games like Sonic 3D Blast and some Pixar licensed
We
games.
know that
It
sucks.
sold well, coming in at 7.2 million units sold across the PS2, Xbox, and GameCube, but like we saw, didn't connect as well as the originals, coming in at only 66%. Their second Crash game, Twinsanity, hits lower at 64% 3 years later. Radical Entertainment, responsible for The Simpsons Hit and Run and some Hulk games,
I like that
takes
game.
over development and releases Crash of the Titans and Mind Over Mutant back to back in 07 and 08. They both do better, but never quite hit the originals. Two things are behind this decline.
Looking
The
for
first
raid.
is a case we've seen time and time again in the video game scene: failure to jump gens. It's an interesting problem and an interesting corner of the entertainment industry. With the increase of stronger hardware availability and audience engagement comes an increase of consumer expectation.
True.
The original Crash games perfected their formula inside the constraints of the PS1's hardware capabilities. When the PS2 hardware dropped with quadruple the memory, the confines Crash Bandicoot were constructed in were naturally knocked down. This happened the same time Naughty Dog let go of their development rights, and this is the second problem. It's a classic case of cover band syndrome. As much as you learn and practice the parts to that song will only ever exist as a projection of what you think that song is to you. These new developers studied the game itself without studying the developer behind it. The creative essence established by Naughty Dog became muddied in the water of weak developer projections and new consumer expectations, resulting in games that are too self-aware.
I've been doing this for 10 stinking years. Back and forward, back and forward.
One-off gameplay gimmicks are reused in Wrath of Cortex, while rounder and bouncier visuals are introduced, moving against the grain of Crash's sharp precision-focused formula. The insane character personalities in Twin
Can you
Sanity
translate what
remain
he's
relatively
saying? The new Crash Bandicoots suck.
intact, but the execution is off-center. It uses a sillier and more slapstick approach, which, for lack of a better phrase, doesn't feel quite right, and at the same time, move to a more, quote, open world, end quote,
What
landscape.
the fuck is that? Did you guys play the
In
new Crash Bandicoots?
originals, the focus is
I didn't know they
predominantly
made 'em.
around progress feedback. The challenge is in completing your overall progression percentage, and collecting crystals,
Even though I didn't
gems,
know
and
they made 'em.
relics are the means to that 100%. This completionist's dream is sacrificed for a forward open-world progression, and this continues through to Radical Entertainment's interpretation. While also open-world, Crash's character design on these last two games
What the fuck?
evolved to a fuzzier, more animalistic aesthetic, which come with a bouncier cartoon animation set.
What the fuck was that?
Putting these games under the lens of beautiful, sharp insanity reveals holes in the foundation of where that fanbase stands. So where to from here? Well, Activision,
now?
you and Sony have been teasing us for a few years now on the subject, so I have no doubt that you already have something in the works. But I hope this assessment illuminates something about who exactly is excited for a new Crash Bandicoot game, and why. Personally, I'd prefer the bones of that Bandicoot to stay buried, but still, I'm interested to see what you bring us. Being the 20th anniversary of the series, the time feels right again for something new, and I would love to experience again that romantic world of beautiful, sharp insanity. Thank you for listening. Love, Javed.
This guy puts so much effort into his videos, Jesus. For what?